Of U.S.-Russia relations. Well, I sat down with Kurt Volker, former U.S. representative to NATO, and asked him how the two countries can improve their rocky relationship.
I think that canceling the meeting with Putin was a very good step. I think it's a healthy recognition that Russia's been going in the wrong direction as far as we're concerned for the last 5 years. This reset policy really didn't bear any fruit. We've seen them crack down on democracy. They're arming Assad in Syria. They're going in so many of the wrong directions. It's about time that I think we take a little break, take a little breather, make sure that they understand that we really don't want to continue this way, and we're going to have to work on some problems for change.
Let me ask you about Russia. What's Russia want out of these talks?
Well, with the Kerry, Hagel, Lavrov, Shoigu talks going on here in Washington today, I think all Russia wants to do is keep the dialogue going. Russia, I think, actually has some clearer policies than we do. They're giving arms to Assad. They're there. They're supporting him. They are putting some pressure on Iran, but not too much, because they want to be seen more closely to Iran. They want to have influence over their near neighborhood. They want to crack down on democracy domestically. So they know what they're doing. And I think they just want to maintain a dialogue with the U.S. so they can continue to separate those issues from any kind of U.S. pressure.
Lavrov said during a news conference today that the Snowden decision was rooted in Russian laws and international obligations, and he talked about an international covenant of 1964 with the U.S. signed on to, and he kind of went into this direction that, we can't really basically let this be a speed bump, an impediment. And do you think that's what it is, an impediment, or does one side see it differently than the other?
Well, look, certainly the sides see them differently. I mean, from the U.S. perspective, Edward Snowden is a criminal. He's fled from justice. He is in Russia, and he ought to be brought back to the U.S. to face a trial. In the case of Russia, they're trying to make this into some kind of political persecution or refugee status. They give him asylum, and they're letting him remain in Russia as a fugitive from justice. Are they under any legal obligation to return him to the United States? No, they don't have a legal obligation. Could they do so? Of course they could.
But in years past, you made this point, and I think it's a good point to kind of go back to. There have been cases where Russians have ended up in the United States where the Russians would have wanted those people back, and the United States did not comply.
Sure.
And he kind of feels as though this shouldn't get in the way of the relationship. Do you agree in that sense?
Well, I agree that we shouldn't obsess about Russia. So I think the United States needs to have its own set of policies about what it's trying to achieve in the world, and then deal with Russia as Russia without obsessing about getting their agreement or some kind of approval or whatever it would take. We should just have our own set of policies. Within that, they say, look, we have a problem with Edward Snowden. He has stolen a lot of classified information. He has leaked that around the world. We'd like to have him come back to the U.S. and face trial, so we should be pursuing that. I don't think that we should make a huge crisis out of it. At the same time, I do think that for other reasons, as I described, about democracy, about the neighborhood, about Syria, about other things, it is time to have a little bit more firmness in our relationship with Russia.
Where can these two countries come together?
You can't pay too close attention to what the Russians say. You have to pay attention to what they do. And they're doing a whole lot of things that we have some concerns about. When you look at areas where we should have some agreement, though, we should have closer cooperation and agreement on fighting Islamist terrorism. That's something that affects Russia and affects us. We should have agreement on leaving behind a stable Afghanistan as the U.S. and NATO forces pull out. Unfortunately, even in these areas, we just don't have the kind of cooperation from Russia that we'd like to have.
But there's this accusation that Russia's still in a Cold War mentality, but I would argue that both sides still have that, don't they? I mean, they really do, seriously.
In this sense, I agree with you. I think the U.S., in terms of the way we look at the world, we've largely moved on. We don't feel that we're threatened by Russia. We're not trying to threaten Russia. But at the same time, we are a little bit in a Cold War mentality if we think that we always have to reach agreement with Russia first before we do anything else. If we're looking at Syria, for example, I mean, this is a catastrophe in the Middle East, and it's spreading. We ought to have our own view about what to do with this rather than feeling that we're trapped unless we can reach some kind of agreement with Russia.
All right. Kurt, thanks so much for talking to us.
Great. Thank you.
Appreciate it.